Good evening, everybody, and a really warm welcome to you to what I think will be a really important and exciting session. A particular welcome to those of you who are joining us for your first Schools of Tomorrow event. We're particularly pleased to welcome you, and welcome to many old friends. And above all, a welcome to a particular old friend, Charles Fadel, who's leading this session for us. Charles is the founder of the Center for Curriculum Redesign in Boston. Um, we've been in touch with him as a critical friend for us over the last decade or so, and followed his work with huge interest. And it's great to see it being built on through this new publication. Before I hand over to him, let me just do a little bit of housekeeping. As you know, this session is being recorded, and we'll make the recording available to you. Uh, can I ask you, if you haven't muted your mic yet, if you can do that for the duration of Charles's presentation? Um, there will be an opportunity to ask questions and have some discussion at the end, but it would be helpful, I think, given the numbers that we're expecting, if you could post questions and thoughts that occur to you in the chat during the session, and we'll try and assemble as many as we can at the end. And then if we have space, open it up to anybody else who has something to ask. But we will try and be finishing fairly smartly at 5 o'clock, as is our usual practice. So, um, uh, I've introduced Charles to you already. Um, the work that has been done by the Centre for Curriculum Redesign around a curriculum for the 21st century, and particularly the four-dimensional framework that came out in 2015, I think has been a really important, really substantial, and really influential piece of work. Um, and it's great to see that it's being um, moved forward into a different time. I've been looking at Charles's book and found it really insightful, thought-provoking, and penetrating. And if I can use the words of no lesser reviewer than ChatGPT-4, it is thoughtful, comprehensive, and a significant contribution to the discourse on education in the digital age. So, Charles, we're really looking forward to hearing you talk some more about the book and the thinking and the research and the ideas behind it. And I'm delighted to hand over to you now.
Thank
Charles.
you so much, Malcolm. It's a pleasure. And hello, everyone. And please, since we don't have enormous numbers here in the audience, feel free to raise a hand. Actually, no, I will not be seeing your hand raised. But so what I'll do is, after each section, I'll stop for a moment, and then I'll ask if you have questions. So periodically, I won't wait all the way till the end. There will be hopefully time at the end, but I just want to make sure that in between, you're not stuck mentally on something. Okay, so let's get going. Plenty to cover, but I'm gonna go rather fast in some sections, so don't worry too much. As a center, we've prided ourselves in developing vision ahead of the pack, because as Steve Jobs says, I'll let you read. So we have typically worked with a number of organizations and jurisdictions, typically the ones at the top of the PISA scale, not because we're heartless about the rest, but only because we want to minimize the number of parameters we have to deal with. So if you have to deal with lack of teachers or hunger or all sorts of other issues, it makes our push forward all the more complicated. And there are plenty of organizations that are dealing with those angles. So we work with the OECD quite a bit, with the IB and others, and Finland and others like that. A quick introduction that matters here is that although the conversation about the AI is very recent, I've been involved in it since after my college years, and at the time where we could only compute 3 layers of artificial neurons. Now, with 100 million fold improvement in processing power, yes, 100 million fold, we can compute 5,000 layers of artificial neurons, and the world has changed. So having started actually in the semiconductor world, I had a interesting inside view on Moore's law and how that was changing things. So back in 2018, we wrote our first book on AI, and that was at the worst possible time because COVID then hit. But it allowed us to reshape things with going from machine learning to language models with this new publication that Malcolm mentioned earlier. Okay, so I'm going to stop after I cover this section about AI hype versus reality. It's important to rebalance things. You've read a lot or heard a lot about general intelligence or super intelligence, where all the jobs disappears and humans are wondering what to do, and super intelligence is smarter than all humans combined. Lucky for me, and for perhaps some of you, this is not about to happen for at least 50 to 100 years. And the reason why I'm saying this is that because I've been around the block, I've seen the hype cycles, and going back to the 1980s, where machine vision was supposed to be solved in one summer by one graduate student, according to Marvin Minsky. Good luck with that. We're still waiting. So we are in this phase of generative AI and large language models, and it is very powerful. And you'll see how powerful it is, but it's not going to be the final stage of everything being done by machines. There's plenty more to do. So quick summary. In the past decade, we were able to solve bounded problems like chess or poker or Stratego, even if the game tree complexity was absolutely enormous in terms of permutations. We are able now to predict how proteins fold. Massive improvements. But these were so-called bounded problems in engineering terms, where you train the system to do one thing and one thing only. Now, from an education perspective, this is really interesting, meaning they can be deep experts, but at the time, they could not transfer. Keep that in mind. We're going to come back to this for LLMs. But, of course, they were very greedy systems. They still are. They need a lot of data. They're very brittle. They get confused easily. For them, both are a face. For us, let's say, disembodied face is not a face. They don't transfer very well. If you train them on recognizing mops, they will think everything is a mop or everything is a towel or everything is a muffin. Of course, we know better. And if we over tweak it on recognizing dogs instead, then you're going to start recognizing dogs everywhere in the supermarket. So that's what, these systems are delicate that way. The data needs to be formatted. They're opaque. We don't know how they converge exactly, but nevertheless, they were able to do amazing things. Now you fast forward to this decade, what we have is language models. These language models now are trained on an enormous variety of data, not just on protein folding or dog recognition or towels. Now they can not just be experts, but they can transfer, and which is one of the advantages of humans, because they see things across different domains. Well, they can transfer too. And because the boundaries are much bigger and they can deal with data types that humans do not have innately. So imagine, for example, if you had a sensor in your body capable of reading gamma ray all the way down to infrasounds, etc. Right? So all of these systems are going to have an enormous amount of information or data types compared to just humans. Nevertheless, the fundamental limitations remain because these are still neural network-based systems. They're hungry for data, they're opaque, they hallucinate, and hallucinations are not, the better word should be confabulations, not hallucinations, but computer scientists are a bit loose with their anthropomorphizations. So it's really confabulation, because this is an autoregressive system that simply sees what's before it and imagines what the next word should be probabilistically. And they don't really reason. It's very brittle. Reasoning is not a good word to use, actually. So I was mentioning the 100 million fold improvement. Yes, that ages me at the same time, but here we go. We went from 3 layers to 5,000 plus layers, and the world has changed. But I also mentioned that we are at the height of the hype cycle in terms of Gen AI and AGI, and that as for all these systems, there's a disillusionment phase which we're approaching, and then the real work starts, and the real work can take on 10, 20 years. So I'm not the only one saying that this is hype. I'll let you read. So that's why, all the worries about what's possible should not be overshadowing the concerns and the focus on the probable. The probable is linked to the fact that this capable phase is really potent because we have a lot of algorithmic progress, faster hardware, computation of multiple LLMs, ability to connect data sets, change algorithms, etc. This is all really powerful, and that's where you see the progress happening every day. And of course, as usual, we're going to be chasing that technology. We always do. And depending on the type of system, we may be lagging more or less. Unfortunately, public policy is the one that lags the further, and education is part, of course, of the public sector. So it lags the most. Okay, I'll stop here. Ask for your questions on this section before I go into jobs and education itself. Any questions?
Nothing coming forward at this point, Charles. I suggest we move on. And
all right, so I must be quite limpid in my explanations. All right, so of course you've seen a lot of research going on about jobs and are they exposed and does that mean they disappear, et cetera, et cetera. Here's a word of caution. When you look at a test versus a task versus a job, there's probably at least an order of magnitude complexity between passing a routine test of some sort to doing the task related to the test, to the job itself. A job is a multiplicity of tasks, and it is at a meta level, meaning it requires coordination and adaptation. So even if one task gets automated, it doesn't necessarily mean that it can be automated across all domains. For instance, if your car is able to drive you across, let's say, Kansas on a rectilinear road, it doesn't mean it's going to drive you at the Place de l'Étoile at rush hour. For those of you who've been there, that's a corrida. So it's a task can be different levels of complexities, and then the job is going to be multiple tasks. So if all you're doing is translating low-level language, sure, you can be automated out of your job as a translator. But if you're translating for mission-critical situations, that's not so easily automated. What typically happens, even with economists, is this Dunning-Kruger effect where we minimize what we don't understand. We trivialize it, and we trivialize our knowledge. Therefore, by trivializing it, we think we know a lot more about it than it really is. It's a little bit like my daughter when she was 10 years old and came with me at work a couple of decades ago. And she was saying, "Hey, Papa, all you're doing is talking on the phone and doing PowerPoints. How is that a job?" Like, well, it is. And the devil is in the details. And that's what we typically do not understand about jobs. Really, we don't. Even databases like ONET are self-reported. They're not deeply analyzed with the cognitive task analysis. So we don't really know what the jobs are about in detail. We also are terrible at forecasting new jobs. did you really know that influencers was going to be a job a decade ago? Well, neither did the World Economic Forum. And we also are terrible at realizing how fast people can adapt. Both employees and employers are fully on trying to adapt to AI. So it's not like people are just waiting to be dislodged. So for all these reasons, I really don't think we should be worrying about AGI taking away all the jobs, but education still needs to deliver regardless. And high school is still partially preparation for jobs, obviously for life as well. But the two are overlapping to a great extent. And by the way, as a quick parenthesis, even if all the jobs were to disappear, what would you do with your 10-year-old? Leave she at home and let them figure out the world by age 20 on their own, just using an AI? Or would you scaffold them with an education? Even if they were to just pursue their sense of purpose, you'd still want to educate them. So I do not see education disappearing at all, if ever. Of course, what we have to teach and how we teach can change dramatically, and that's what we're going to talk about next. But I'll stop at this point. Questions? Just checking, Malcolm, is my audio okay? Am I intelligible? Is there noise in my background?
No, I'm hearing it fine, Charles.
Okay.
So I'm not picking up any problems at all. Thank you.
Okay.
Let's
Great.
move on.
Moving on. So looking at the consequences for education. First of all, a very crude way of looking at it is to look at Bloom's taxonomy and say, oh my God, these systems can do it all. And say, oh, well, luckily, they cannot do the effective side. Well, they can do most of the effective side too, at a macro level. We say, okay, well, how about the psychomotor side? Well, they can also do a lot of psychomotor things too. So crude level analyses really, really do not give us much information. Sure, they can do a lot of things, but we need a lot more data because the devil is in the detail. 10 years ago, Foxconn said that they were going to be replacing 1 million Chinese assembly workers. It hasn't happened. Self-driving cars, after $1 billion wasted or spent, let's call it, hasn't happened. So there's a lot to be analyzed. And when you look at the detail of a given competency like creativity, you have to really go through the components of it, the sub-competencies like developing personal tastes and generating new ideas, and whether AI can outperform humans or not right now and in the future, and whether AI can complement humans. That's the sort of analysis that's required, not just this very crude analogy to Bloom's taxonomy. And that's what we've done in our research. Also, a key durable consequence is looking at identity, agency, and purpose. Well, yes, AI, these language models have an identity. The data sets they've been trained on, the algorithms that were used, and the user interfaces they're given all give them an identity. But they don't have much agency. I mean, they literally have to talk so that they can actually think, and think, with heavy quotation marks. And they don't have a sense of purpose. So as long as we don't surrender that, AI is passive, we are active, we're in control. It's a human choice to be made. Okay, so what's an education in times of uncertainty about? In our opinion, it's about versatility. We have no idea what the future holds. Let's be humble about it. And so an education should give you a large array of tools, and you can, of course, sharpen that tool as the need arises. And that means it's a T-shaped person, broad and deep, not broad or deep. And over time, you can increase the breadth by adding different depth of endeavors. This is how we ended up, of course, creating the framework that you've seen before: knowledge, skills, character, and meta-learning. And before I go into the details, I'm gonna stop briefly and see if you have questions so far. Okay. So what does this mean? What does it mean to modernize the knowledge side? That means paying attention to modernizing traditional disciplines. Like in mathematics, why so much trigonometry and so little data science, statistics, and probability? Why no computational discrete mathematics? In performing arts, sure, it's about acting, but why not debate and comedy and improv? Particularly if we're in a world where you need to react fast on your feet, well, then improv should give you a lot more of that capability, etc. So the traditional disciplines need to be revamped, but also we need to make room for modern disciplines like technology and engineering. No surprise, but it's not only about computer science. It's about a bunch of other things, and like civil, mechanical, etc., engineering, and entrepreneurship and social sciences. All of these disciplines matter for a broad education. And that's not what you see in typical curriculum. So that's for the knowledge part. I'll stop briefly if you have questions about that before I get into the other dimensions. I see. Will the slides be shared? Yes. Okay. So now when it comes to skills, in my 2009 book, 21st Century Skills, after that book, I was pleased to see a number of countries embracing the terminology and the concepts, but very disappointed 5 years ago when I found out that in spite of the good talk, no one offered pedagogy or assessments out of all these jurisdictions. So we've embarked on doing that. And thinking through what the competencies are in an age of AI, you have to go through every single one of the competencies. You see them here listed. And you see whether AI can outperform humans or not. That's our analysis. Whether they complement humans and when they can catch up in the next 5 years. Note, perhaps to your surprise, that we're saying yes to creativity, whereas typically people think that it's a field where AI would trail humans. And I'm gonna do a quick dive on that. But you notice the level of detail we have to go through to make these decisions. Because courage, for example, is not just fearlessness. It's a lot more things that humans do with courage. So yes, an AI will be fearless in the sense that as a fighter pilot, as an AI fighter pilot, they will dive towards you because they don't have a concept of fear of death. They will be tireless in reading to your 5-year-old the same book for the 5,000th time with the same joyfulness. But it doesn't mean that they're going to be resilient or courageous at a human level with all the different characteristics of that. So what are we saying about creativity? Why creativity is actually more targetable than otherwise? Well, because most of the innovation is incremental. AI is really good at looking at analogies and extrapolate from these analogies, as humans do for the most part. And that's just an example of one of my patents on video. I didn't invent the concept of video. I just refined some aspects of video conferencing. That's incremental. The imagination part, on the other hand, is what my friend Pierre Reynolds did when he fell asleep and woke up with a dot of ink, a big blob of ink under his pen, and thought, what can I do with this? And he created a little story about the dot. That's imagination. And AI is going to be pushing us towards training for more imagination than creativity. However, with all the caveats I said before, that creativity is more than just coming up with a good idea. It's making it work. And that's a lot of other things too. So that's why all of these conversations are very nuanced, and it's a nuance that's missing out of the various debates you're seeing here and there. Okay, I'll stop here before talking about personalization. The dot is a great story. Yeah, I agree with that. So, all right. So now next phase. How do you personalize all of this, and why would you personalize? Well, here's the story. Our brains are lazy by good evolutionary design, as I keep saying. Lazy by good evolutionary design. It's because our brains represent 20% of the energy consumption of the body for 5% of the body mass. So our brains had to go into system one as quickly as possible, react on emotion, react fast, minimize the amount of deep thinking. And that's fine for 90% perhaps of our activities. We judge people by what they're wearing. We judge them in 2 minutes. We judge them by their accent, etc., etc., etc. We take a lot of shortcuts. So our brains take shortcuts. And if you have access to an AI that can help you do all sorts of things, your brain is going to be tempted to take shortcuts. And we see this in students all the time. Just tell me what I need to do to get a good grade. I don't care about learning. I care about the grade. So how do you motivate students in an age where it's a lot easier to have the AI write the essay for you than laboring on writing the essay or thinking about what a good essay is about? Well, if an education pushes you forward by motivating you via your sense of identity, agency, and purpose, there's a better chance of getting there. And so agency is, of course, the amount of prescription versus opportunity as chosen by you versus prescribed by society that changes over time. Purpose has to be related to not just what you love, but also what you're good at, what the world needs, and what you can be paid for the Ikigai model. And that can be all built through projects, because the real world is concrete and organized by problems and projects. And so we have built a database of 340 projects lined up with the UN SDGs and the global challenges for humanity, etc., so that a student can find how to, find their purpose and passion via a given project in a given discipline. All right, stopping for a moment here.
Can I ask a question, Charles? In the scene that you've described, which is one of great change and upheaval, there's a phrase quite early in your book that you use, which really struck me, speaking about schools as islands of stability.
Yes.
Would you like to sort of unpack that in the context of the things that you're talking about? How do you see that?
Certainly. Yes, actually, it's something I should have expanded on in the book, but I thought it was gonna be so. It's really a response to the fact that the world is changing so much, right? And our kids are stressed witnessing all this change, and we have stressors related to family situations and so on, things that little kids can sense. But we also have broader stressors than teenagers can sense about the planet's shape, wars, etc., etc. In a world where everything changes so much, schools become all the more essential to providing the stability. So rather than dissing schools and saying, we should not have schools, people should stay at home, all these silly exaggerations, we should really be looking at schools as, wow, not only is it a babysitting function and education function, but it's an emotional stability function as well. It's a place where they can find familiarity in a world that's constantly changing around them. And that familiarity is very, very grounding. We need that groundedness.
Thank you. I mean,
Sure,
there's quite a lot I'd like to explore further there, but let's
sure.
open it up to anybody else and move on through the session because obviously time is um,
Right.
limited for us.
Well, it's only about 5 to 10 minutes before we open it for questions. So obviously, there's no escaping learning with the machines, and that's normal. That's normal. It's just that we, we always resist that at first, and we overhype it at first. So the resistance, for example, to calculators and to search, and now completely accepted, or overhyped, or overfeared. My God, with calculators, kids will not know how to do math. Or, oh my God, with search, they will not know how to learn, etc., etc. So sure, there are exaggerations on both sides. Like everything, it's an N curve with moderation. You want some of it, and you want it wisely. It's not a free-for-all. But this aspect of learning with technology dates back, even to 1899, when Jean-Marc Gaultier was doing cartoons in France about a number of ways he would see year 2000. And in year 2000, we would be learning via a machine that was crunching books and coming up with electricity going into audio systems. So that's a pretty much metaphoric view nowadays of learning. But we are very limited by the capabilities of the day in terms of thinking of what the possibilities are. So obviously, we're going to have possibilities along the lines of intelligent tutoring systems, and we're going to have possibilities on the side of helping teachers become better. So in our view, we have developed actually a language model that is there to support teachers, which is a language model which is trained on peer-reviewed papers so that teachers can focus a lot more on local adaptations and personalized student learning, etc., rather than on spending so much time creating material up front. The system will help them at first answer a number of questions they may have. And as I said, this is based on learning science, not Joe's opinion on Reddit. And over time, it will become a lesson plan generator. So again, it will allow teachers to spend much more time on personalization and so on. And then on the intelligent tutoring system side, there's a range of possibility. What is the ratio of teacher participation versus student participation? Is it teacher only or fully automated or everything in between? That will depend on a number of things, including, for instance, the verticality of a discipline like mathematics, which is a lot more threaded and a lot easier in a sense to automate than something that's more horizontal. But there are also big gains, right? We've seen from even adaptive learning without AI that self-pacing can, of course, be helpful for students that fall behind, that the average learning time reduction is a reality for a lot of learners. You can actually learn faster than the teacher can speak. And with AI, we may be in a better position to address Bloom's two sigma problem, where we have truly an intelligent tutor shouldering the student alongside the teacher. So it becomes a triumvirate of the teacher, the student, and the AI all working together rather than just the teacher and the student. So there you have it. Tried to cover an enormous range of things. Obviously, the book will do it more justice, but even there, there's just so much potential that we're all discovering together. It's actually a fascinating moment in the life of humans, if I exclude all the terrible things that humans are uniquely suited at generating for themselves, like wars and global warming, etc. I mean, we are our worst enemy, we always try to blame something else like technology, but technology is the tool. We are the enemy of ourselves. So education, we all view, that's why we're here, we all view education as a way, at least partially, out of these problems. And I look forward to all working together on making that a reality.
Thank you, Charles, for a great introduction to a massive topic, and obviously based on a huge knowledge and research and background into um, what is happening and what might happen in the future. We're opening it up for comments or questions, either through the chat or through raising a hand. I can see a question popping up. Let me. There's a question about how AI might help individuals with special needs, which is, in a sense, an aspect of the personalization agenda that you were talking about, Charles.
Yep.
And another question about any examples of AI enhancing holograms or mixing the two. Should we take the personalization one first and then come to holograms?
Sure. So regarding personalization, I mean, in a certain way, everybody is a special student at this point, right? Everyone is very unique in its needs and capabilities. So I think that what special ed people are facing is going to become routine in the sense that the techniques they have to use are going to be more generalized to everybody because everyone has one need that's different or another. It's just that mass personalization was not possible. With intelligent tutoring systems, mass personalization becomes more possible. The degree of and the extent of it remain to be seen, but certainly you can imagine, for example, the chatbot I was showing you earlier. Suppose that the first question you ask the chatbot is, as a teacher, how do I teach critical thinking while I'm teaching fractions? Chatbot answers. Now you're in the classroom and you realize, whoa, Charles has a short-term memory problem. Asking the chatbot, hey, and by the way, to this question about fractions and critical thinking, what do I do when a kid has short-term memory issues? Chatbot answers. So it can really help on the spot in special ed conditions, as well as more generically speaking in personalizing education.
It's interesting that you're seeing it there as being as much a help to the teacher as to the student. Would you like to pick up the question about holograms and AI?
I will only as a physicist.
Right, and then we'll go to Ryan, who's got a hand up.
Sure, I haven't seen that being done. I suppose it can, but I'm not sure what your use case is. So very curious to hear why would you do that.
Okay, well, James may want to come back on that, but let's go to Ryan for a question.
Sure.
You open up your mic and ask
Yeah.
away.
Yeah. Hey, thanks for letting me listen in today. I thought this was great. Charles, I've been following your work for a decade or more, and so it's really cool to see the progression. I'm also very interested in AI, doing some work with helping schools think about how do they integrate, what do they do about AI. I'd love to hear your thoughts on, what's the scaffolding for a school or a district that helps them start to onboard into this new way of thinking. And as somebody who's trained to help schools do that, what advice would you have about helping them get up to speed in a way where they can cognitively grasp it, systemically sort of metabolize it, and then execute it. So I'd love to hear any thoughts you have in that realm.
So first of all, schools are very short-term minded, pretty much by design, right? They have to deliver tomorrow in the classroom. They don't have the luxury of redesigning curricula from scratch. So part of our message goes to jurisdictions. The what we teach, that has to go to jurisdictions, and they have to reshape the standards and the curriculum. Schools are right now only concerned about the very short term, which in 6 months will no longer be an issue. They're concerned about AI policies, from ethics to whatever use cases, etc. And they're wanting to have their teachers trained on AI literacy. Okay, great. In 6 months, none of these things will be an issue. Teachers should take the time, but they don't have the time to play with AI and just discover it by themselves without particular training. But some teachers are, let's say, technology reluctant or concerned or whatever. They would like to have something more systematic offered to them. Fine. Now, even for these short-term issues of, let's say, cheating, etc., there's obvious answers. The same way that people were concerned about search before, about, oh my God, the kid is going to go search. How do I know whether it's their work or not their work? Very simple. Turn the device off, have them do the work, turn the device on, have them do the work again, aided, compare the two, criticize one with the other, validate the results of the AI result versus your own result, etc. Force them at the meta level, force them to disclose to you how they have written the prompts, how they have refined the prompts, etc. There's so many ways you can make it beyond trivial cheating. So it requires a little bit of imagination, and that's valid across the board. So all of these things are going to be done fairly soon. People will have an idea how to do this. Then it becomes a question of, well, how do I embed this into math education, into history education, etc., the same way that I have embedded search in my education. It's learning with technology. And the more important thing, the thing that really concerns me, is this brain being lazy by good evolutionary design. My real concern is not, AI destroying humankind, is humans becoming so lazy that because of their evolution, that they let AI take over their thinking. That's what really concerns me. And so in a school, you're going to have to constantly battle the, hey, but AI can give me the answer, or hey, AI could give me the answer, Google could give me the answer. Why would I need to learn anything? That's the battle, the constant battle. And that joins the question of scaffolding you were answering. You have to say, dude, we cannot leave you in your room playing video games for 20 years and then magically you know how to use AI. Not going to happen.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay, thanks. There's a follow-up question on holograms from James about linking a hologram of Henry VIII to AI to enable pupils to ask questions. And that comes out of a discussion of a theatre company looking at how to make history more engaging.
Okay, so, all right. So, well, all right. So you're going straight to the hologram, or have gone to a 2D representation of Henry VIII first before going full hologram 3D, but fine, perfectly fine by me. Yes, the simple answer is yes, the technology can do this, and the technology can make Henry VIII talk. That's the gizmo-y part. Okay, sure, it's cool. I'm a technologist. It's cool, can be done, it's amazing. The Princess Leia thing from the first Star Wars is now a reality. Wonderful. But what's Henry VIII going to say that is actually useful to understand what was going on in his days? That's the hard part. And so, as usual, people are going to be looking at something that's shiny, but not necessarily deep. And I always worry about people spending all the time, all the money on the shiny aspect of technology, not on the deep aspect. So yes, it can be done. But what are you actually going to have Henry VIII say that's useful? That's useful because you have the extra advantage, at least for a year or two, of that shock of discovery of an avatar that's talking to you. In 2 years, it will be a who cares, right? So it still has to be like you do in acting, in theater. It has to be about generating an emotion. And so you're back to square one. How do you generate emotion? The avatar is a little plus, and it's a transitory little plus. But it's back to generating emotion because emotion is what sticks our knowledge in.
Thanks, Charles. Can I pick up on the what I think are the really important themes of identity, purpose, and agency that you touched on when you were talking about the curriculum framework? Because it seems to me that often our schools are not do not function in a way which promotes those three things. If they're the really important things that we need to be working towards, what is it that we need to be doing differently?
Yeah, well, it's a bit like competencies. They sometimes do, sometimes don't. It's always haphazard. You always will have teachers that say, but I promote agency. I let my kids choose whatever book they want. I let them do a project that's of interest to them. So there are elements of that here and there and everywhere. It's not that an education system is devoid of them. But like for competencies, what we're asking for is that it be deliberate, systematic, comprehensive, and demonstrable. I'll repeat: deliberate, systematic, comprehensive, and demonstrable. Not just haphazard. And so, yes, you can absolutely build identity and belonging in the way, for example, you teach an English course via the choice of texts that are going to address these issues. You can then give the student agency in deciding whether they want the Korean author or the Spanish author of my selection of books. And as a quick parenthesis, we have a database of 275 works of literature from across the globe, yes, in English, but from across the globe, and balanced to be really world literature, not Anglo-Saxon literature. That will be only 10% of the total. And so you have all of the other cultures represented, even if in English. So as a student, as a teacher, I'm going to be able to exercise that sense of identity and agency by choosing A, the topic, B, the book. It can be done at multiple layers in any discipline. And that's a design issue. It's a mindset issue. How do I do that while I'm designing my lesson plan? It's not complicated. It's just one more thing that you have to embed in the way you design the lesson plan, alongside core concepts, competencies, etc. It's a design complexity that is requiring in time this lesson plan generator I mentioned, because then you can take care of all of these parameters in a streamlined way. When it comes to purpose, to finish, that's where, of course, projects are very, very motivating and very purpose-laden. So suppose, for instance, that part of the agency is that we choose what type of robot we have to design. Okay, so I'll choose a flying robot, and you, Malcolm, will choose let's say, a marine robot. And our teacher is going to say, okay, that's nice, that's your agency. Purpose now, what are you going to do with that robot? That's actually a usefulness that's useful for humankind. And you'll say, my marine robot is going to count plastic particles, or swim with dolphins, or whatever, listen to whales singing and understand their language. And Charles, the robot, is going to fly over minefields or crops or whatever. This is how you have, while you're doing the project, while you're motivating, while you're exercising identity and agency, you're also developing a sense of purpose. All these things can be done simultaneously. And again, the trick is to do them deliberately, systematically, comprehensively, and demonstrably.
Demonstrably. Thank you, Charles. There's a question from Iran about, which I think partly builds on what you've just been talking about. Many educational institutions use digital resources in which algorithms make choices, for instance, adapting exercises to students' behavior. There are advantages, but also risks to this, helping some pupils, but sidetracking others. And some teachers fear discrimination coming through the choice of algorithm. Have you got thoughts on that, Charles?
Sure. And
I
there's
hope
also,
I've explained the question. Do jump in, your own, if I haven't.
sorry, I'm losing my voice.
Okay, only a few minutes to go. Hopefully it will hold
Yeah,
out.
actually,
Thank you.
allow me to go grab something to drink.
We've got about 5 minutes remaining. So if anybody else has a question that they want to put forward, perhaps you can either put a hand up or drop it in the chat now while we have a very short break so that we can organise the use of the 5 minutes in the best possible way.
Okay, I'm back. I don't guarantee that I'll be able to speak for 5 more minutes. But to answer the question, look, sure, AI has its biases, but so do individuals. So teachers make decisions all the time about how they track students, right? So which one will be better at making these decisions to be determined? Of course, a blind AI system could be blind, but a judge, for example, in a legal system, giving harsher sentences after lunch, well, that's a bias too. That's what happens routinely. So I hope that we use machines as a way to highlight our own messy behavior too, not just either idolize or blame the machines. That's my answer.
Okay, thanks. Is there anything else? Nobody's popped up with a question or a hand that I can see. Shout if I've missed it. In which case, to save Charles's voice from further punishment, we'll bring things to a close. Charles, thank you ever so much for sharing those insights. It's probably worth saying to everybody that the book is, of course, available on Amazon, but in a sense, it opens up a huge topic for us all to be thinking about, and I think will change the way in which we choose to organise our schools and our classrooms in the long term. And I think the really key thing which I've taken away from this is that we need to do that proactively and with some of those attributes like courage and confidence and compassion and clear-sightedness that you've alluded to. So Charles, thank you ever so much. Thank you everybody for joining us this evening. We will be sharing the video and the slides in due course. And can I wish you all a really pleasant evening, and I hope the weather is better where you are than where I am. It's a pretty miserable evening here in not so sunny Peterborough. But thanks everybody. Thank you, Charles. Have a very good night.
My pleasure. Thank you, everyone. Take care. Good luck.